I think the thing that I loved the most about my career as a firefighter and EMT was the opportunity to help people on the streets. I think having that chance to interface with residents and people who were roaming through our wonderful city really filled something in me, and I felt like I was making a difference every day with my choice to be at work. I think I knew that I was in a really dangerous position when I started asking for help. When I took the path through all the correct channels in my department and in the city, and not only were those falling on deaf ears, they were almost criticized. Often I was discredited for those complaints. I was starting to see daily that my supervisor was given basically carte blanche on singling me out, writing me up, harassing me in how I handled every situation. I felt it not only at fire scenes, but in my daily training and interaction with crew members. I was undermined, I was discredited for promotions. All these things became layers of my day, which often took on a very shaded, gray routine. I started questioning my own effectiveness as a fire captain in this situation. The department was making me almost rendered helpless. I was on my own, it seems, and it got very dangerous. Not only personally off the job, but it got very reckless and dangerous on the job, and that's when you know you need help.
You know, as a firm, and as attorneys, we represent employees, and we have a high level of respect for the employment environment. And in Chris's case in particular, we have a high degree of respect for the profession, firefighters, for people who work in first responder types of jobs. It's just that sometimes in workplace situations, things just go very, very badly inside a place of high integrity. And I guess I could say that that was also one of the reasons that this case was so important and so compelling for us as attorneys.
The Minneapolis Fire Department has a proud history of providing emergency response to the city of Minneapolis. People who live, work, and play in Minneapolis receive superior emergency services from a diverse, highly skilled firefighting workforce that prides itself on serving the community and enriching the city. Minneapolis firefighters are trained to respond to structure fires, medical emergencies, emergencies on lakes and rivers, technical and hazardous material catastrophes, and natural disasters citywide. The MFD responds to approximately 35,000 calls for service per year. According to the International Association of Women in Fire and Emergency Services, Minneapolis has the highest proportion of women firefighters among large departments in the nation, with 17%. Both the city and the fire department have promoted and facilitated the participation of women in the fire service. They sought to create an environment in which everyone is treated with respect and dignity, demanding integrity and honesty from themselves and others, reaching out to mentor, to network, to support, to advocate for positive changes in the culture of the fire service, deliberately developing future leaders for the fire services who will embrace these values. And in January 2005, the Minneapolis Fire Department and Minneapolis Mayor Ryback set a national example of those values by selecting the first openly lesbian fire chief named Bonnie Bleskacek. The appointment of Bleskacek marked an important milestone for women and for lesbians in particular in the city. But unfortunately, Bleskacek lasted only 14 months on the job when she was forced to resign over sordid allegations of assault, sexual harassment, discrimination, and abuse of power. Today, the Insider Exclusive goes behind the headlines in Minneapolis Fire Department Chris Lemon's story. to examine how Frances Baillon and Joni Thome, partners at Baillon, Thome, Jozwiak, and Wanta, successfully represented Kris in 2 lawsuits between 2007 and 2013, discovering more about the dysfunctional dynamics of this department. After Kris Lemon's first lawsuit relating to the sexual harassment and retaliation by Bleskacek was successfully resolved, the city engaged in a campaign of retaliation that spanned another 3 years. It was shocking, disappointing, and once again actionable retaliation under the law. An independent investigator later found that Bleskacek had intimate relationships with 3 firefighters under her command, and the investigation substantiated at least 19 allegations of inappropriate conduct, retaliation against adversaries, and other instances of abuse of authority. The city paid millions of taxpayer dollars to settle 7 lawsuits brought by 5 firefighters who allege misdeeds by Bleskacek. Several suits accused her of derailing careers within the department while allowing romantic relationships to cloud her professionalism. Frances Baillon and Joni Thome have earned the highest respect from citizens and lawyers alike as some of the best trial lawyers in Minneapolis, in Minnesota, and in the nation. They have seen many innocent and hardworking people become victims of discrimination and injustice. They understand that discrimination is one of the most serious, enduring, and divisive human rights violations in the United States. The problem is not just in Minneapolis, but nationwide, and its nature is institutionalized. Their goal is not only to get justice for their clients, but to make sure that all Americans are not denied job opportunities, fired, or otherwise discriminated against. This is the Insider Exclusive, live from Minneapolis, Minnesota. It is my great pleasure to introduce Frances Baillon and Joni Thome to the show. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Tell our audience a little bit about your law firm. What kind of law do you practice?
We have 2 primary areas of practice, and one is employment law. And we represent only employees. So typically, people that we represent as individuals in those cases are people who have been victim to some kind of discrimination, retaliation, that sort of thing in their workplaces. We also have a consumer protection practice that addresses kind of the same, some similar concepts in that representing employees is representing a smaller group against a larger group, typically, so the little guy. And we feel the same way about in our representation of consumers in our consumer practice.
Today we are here because you helped one such person, Kris Lemon. Would you tell our audience who Kris is?
Sure. Kris Lemon was a firefighter with the Minneapolis Fire Department. By the time Kris came to us for representation, she had been serving with the department for a number of years and had gone from firefighter to fire captain. And Kris is a person who has a very, very strong sense of fairness, high degree of integrity.
She came to you in 2007, I believe, correct?
It was 2007, and I had actually been following some of the stories coming out of the department and some of the lawsuits that had come about as a result of some of the conduct of its newly appointed chief at the time. There was a woman appointed chief. I think she was the first, well, certainly was the first woman to be appointed to that position in the city of Minneapolis. And she's a woman and she is lesbian. And it was kind of a big deal. It was pretty exciting that a woman chief and a lesbian in our city. Minneapolis is a city that respects diversity and you know, like I said, they had been integrating women into the department, but now to have a chief, it was a big deal. But it happened very quickly that Lemon was sexually harassed by this chief, along with several other women. And those women all brought lawsuits against the city based on the sexual harassment by the chief. Those lawsuits litigated for some period of time until they finally settled. And Kris's settlement was in 2007, and that's sort of the background, the backstory that we would hope would have been the end of Kris Lemon versus the city of Minneapolis, but it wasn't. It was just the very beginning of what would become a 6-year ordeal for Kris.
And what happened during that time?
Well, I think, you know, it started off small, which is usually how these things sort of work. You know, she hadn't experienced any sort of adverse action while her first lawsuit was pending. Then when it settled and when it was done, that's when things started to change. And it's as small as not listening to a direct order from their captain, some of the firefighters she worked with, and how not following her orders, how that was treated by the administration, and how those things escalated into even sending her for a fitness for duty exam, which is pretty serious for the fire department. Evidence showed in our case that only really serious issues that are exhibiting themselves in a firefighter or a captain, those people are sent. And Kris's situation wasn't one of those. And after that, there were other acts after, you know, questioning whether or not she really had an injury, even though others witnessed that she was injured. Hiring an investigator to follow her, another unprecedented act by the department that's done
Outside
rarely.
of her workplace.
Yes. So that's just an example of how the retaliatory acts were taken by the department and how things escalated as time went on.
Let's talk about when you entered the scene and you started representing. She came to you about this retaliation in 2007. What did your investigation find?
I probably should say that I hesitated at first in really pursuing Kris's story and learning more about it from the very first phone call. Not because of anything Kris was telling me, but because of the history and the way that the city had handled, or in my opinion, mishandled the sexual harassment cases. And you know, because the result of those was that the chief, who was the perpetrator, found by our city to have been a perpetrator of these acts, she got to keep a job. She didn't continue on as chief, but she was demoted into a position and still works for the department today. So it starts from there, where I wasn't like, oh, really excited, I got a call from this firefighter and it's related to these cases. But as Kris told her story, it then became more about, wait, our city made a big mistake, in my opinion, and it's continuing, and it's just perpetuating the conduct that, or condoning the conduct that had started this ball rolling in the first place.
So what were some of the legal issues you had to prove and the challenges to prove this case?
Well, speaking to the retaliation claims, you have to show that the person has reported retaliatory or hostile or discriminatory conduct. And in Kris's case, it really wasn't very hard. She had at least 7 reports, that most of which were in writing to the department, fell right within the department's own policies as to what you're supposed to do. And that's what was troubling in this case, is that Kris really tried. She really tried to reach out to the department and get their help. And it really fell on deaf ears for a long time. So that's sort of the first issues. You have to show that you've actually reported the conduct to the employer, and she had certainly done that, and the court found the same. And if I could talk about the next thing, which is you have to show that adverse or bad things happen as a result of doing that. And again, the court found, and the evidence showed, really there was this systematic pattern of her reporting something and something bad happens. She reports something, it's a fitness for duty exam. She reports something,
Yeah, unfortunately it cost the city of Minneapolis a lot of money, didn't it? this case as well as all the other cases.
Yeah, in fact, you know, there was the first set that came out of the sexual harassment claims, and then there was Chris's first case that we represented her on, her second case as a firefighter, and out of that litigation, it seemed that one of the witnesses in that litigation also suffered demotion and retaliation, ultimately sued and received an award at trial. And Chris actually ended up having, you know, all this time that we were litigating this case and through the trial, she was still employed by the city and still working as a firefighter captain.
Yeah.
And we thought, okay, went through that trial, got a really, what we believe to be a really great order from the judge. It was tried to a judge, not a jury. And there's some pretty scathing language in the order that the judge used about the retaliatory nature of the city's conduct and this campaign of retaliation and so on. So one would think that, okay, that all happened. We've been at this for many years now. It's 2010. It's December 2010 when the order comes out. Should be done. Not going to have this happen again. It was less than a year later. It was the fall of 2011 when Chris Lemon calls again and starts telling us her newest story about further retaliation within the department.
And what was the ultimate outcome on that one?
The ultimate outcome on that one was that that case resolved inside of, I don't know, what was it, about 10 months?
Yeah.
Yeah. We are lucky enough to have Chris with us today, so I'd like to bring her on so she can tell her story. Let's do that. It is my great pleasure to introduce Chris Lemon to the show. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Thank you.
Boy, when we looked at your case, and Joni was telling us more about it, you went through a horrible experience from 2007 to 2013. What were your feelings and your thoughts when you were trying to report things that were going on that weren't right and you were being retaliated against? What did you feel like?
I think initially I tried to reread every document that was given to me within the city and my department to find the path to take to report appropriately. I wanted to make the right choices, do the right documentation. When that started to fall on deaf ears and very clearly have sort of ill perception of what I was doing, I was pretty frustrated. I was worried, not only for my personal safety in my career, but my credibility that was being damaged by the administration.
When you say your personal safety, what do you mean by that?
Well, considering my career was firefighting and EMT work on the streets, I rely heavily on the relationships that I form with my supervisors directly, and my other crew members were essentially a team. As my credibility was damaged repeatedly by the administration, that affects communication. As a leader on the streets, I need to be able to make decisions and have those people respond around me appropriately. When I felt like that was starting to not happen, that puts myself in an unsafe situation and those people I'm responsible for.
You're on national TV right now, Chris. What do you think, what do you hope that the management at the Minneapolis Fire Department has learned from this experience?
I hope they took the opportunity to look at the choices they made around a person like myself trying to get assistance with the retaliation and to move my career forward. I hope they'll look at the integrity and level of dedication they have to the service they provide on the streets for the residents and to the personnel who's doing that work, and take those words seriously and start to support the staff, and more importantly, walk their talk. They need to be the example, and that has to be important, essential.
How has this whole experience changed you?
This experience, in particular because of how long it lasted in my life, has changed me on many levels. It's changed me personally in my understanding how people will fail you, and they will fail you at a level of extreme importance at times because of their own personal choices and agendas. It's also reinforced in my own work ethic and personal integrity that despite how difficult a decision is, at times you have to make the right decision. And doing the right thing supersedes some adversity, and at times extreme adversity.
How about trust?
Trust. It's made it very difficult for me to believe in the city in particular, and in this department in particular.
Right.
And as I look across the board nationally, we have a long ways to go in the fire service. And we have some great leaders across the pond, if you will.
And lastly, how do you think of the way your law firm, Joni and Frances, handled your case?
I think the primary thing I loved about the way they represented me is that they were 100% truthful, not only in their personal support or sort of talk about how we needed to handle this, but legally they really were tenacious. They were forthright in how this is going to play out. It's not a romantic process. It's ugly, it's long, but they're there. They're anchored in with me, and I felt supported the entire time.
Well, I want to thank you very much for spending time with us. Your experience has been horrible, but fortunately you had a great law firm that tried to get justice for you and did. Thank you.
Thank you.
How do you select your clients and your cases?
Well, we mostly get phone calls, and we spend some time speaking with people. Actually, can spend quite a bit of time talking to people, and obviously beyond sort of do you meet the legal elements of a case, which really a lot of people don't understand that, you know, just being fired for a wrong reason, that's not going to give you a cause of action. It has to be actually one that's illegal. So after you find out whether or not you think someone has sort of met the legal elements, I know for me and for the people I work with, we want to represent people who we really believe in, who have really shown that they were wronged, and that something unfair or unjust has happened. And a lot of times I also look for people who I know that I trust, and that you believe and know what they're saying is true. Doing this for 15 years and Joni for 20 years, you learn kind of how to read somebody and what they tell you, whether or not it's kind of passing the smell test. And that's really
so a lot of it has to do with their character,
whether
you believe in them.
Well, and we determined that in a very short time. I mean, but after as many years as we've been doing this, we think, and it's turned out to be true most all the time, that we can have a conversation over the phone with somebody, and we've learned how to ask the right questions to get to the nut of it, you know, to kind of cut through everything that happened to get to the points that we need to have answers to in order to make a decision about whether the person has the case. And in that phone conversation, which can be 5 minutes, it can be an hour, we've usually, by the end of that phone conversation, made a decision that we're going to meet this person in person because we think that there's something, there's a case to look into. Because we get a lot of calls, a lot.
Well, with the cases that you have won and settled, you have high media exposure, which is good.
Yeah, and it's not always about, you know, people probably wouldn't believe it, but I think our clients understand it once they worked with us, that it's not about the bottom dollar, about your wage or your salary. It's really about helping that person and stopping the employer from doing whatever they've been doing that's not okay.
Right. Well, you guys do a great job, and we are certainly very happy to have had you on the show And thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. You can get more information about our guest and the issues at insiderexclusive.com.